Okay, let's dive into this. We're looking at a tricky situation up in Canada, specifically for auto dealers.
Yeah, they're facing some headwinds, mainly from U.S. trade moves, tariffs,
Yeah.
specifically from the Trump administration.
Right, those import taxes, they basically drive up the cost of bringing cars and parts across the border.
Exactly. And that's got the Canadian Automobile Dealers Association, CADA, thinking proactively.
Their CEO, Tim Rias, has floated an interesting idea, hasn't he?
He has. The proposal is basically for Canada to start accepting auto safety standards from places like Europe, Korea, and Japan, not instead of North American ones, but alongside them.
Okay, so expanding the options beyond just the usual North American standards, what's the underlying problem they're trying to fix here?
Well, the big worry, according to Rias, is a potential consumer affordability crisis. It's getting expensive.
How so? Just the tariffs.
The tariffs are a major part. They add costs all the way down the line, parts, assembly, everything. And that ultimately means, higher sticker prices for you, the buyer.
Which makes sense. And Canada's market, it's much smaller than the U.S.
Precisely. So manufacturers, naturally, they focus on designing and pricing cars for the huge U.S. market, first and foremost.
And if a car isn't going to sell well in the U.S. or meet their specific affordability points,
then it's often just too expensive for them to make a Canada-specific version that meets North American rules just for our smaller numbers. Rias points this out clearly.
So Canadians end up with fewer choices, basically dictated by U.S. tastes and regulations.
That's the current situation, yeah. Which leads to this other interesting angle.
The forbidden fruit idea, cars you can't get here now.
Exactly. If Canada accepts, say, European standards, maybe some of those models popular over there could finally show up on Canadian lots.
And Rias makes a point about safety, doesn't he? Kind of a rhetorical question.
He does. He asks something like, do we really think a car built to handle the German Autobahn isn't safe enough for Canadian roads?
It's a fair question. Those European standards are rigorous.
Definitely. And it's important to understand this isn't about, hitting back at the U.S.
No retaliation intended.
Rias is clear on that. He frames it as Canada expanding its trade horizons, opening up options, and apparently most manufacturers, even the American ones, are okay with it.
That's key. So it's seen more as diversification.
Yeah, an opportunity for Canada to get a wider range of vehicles, potentially more affordable ones too.
Okay, let's talk examples. He mentioned hatchbacks.
Right, hatchbacks are, super popular in Europe, often practical, good value.
But less so in the U.S. market, traditionally.
Exactly. And because the U.S. market doesn't demand them as much, Canadians often miss out on those potentially efficient, maybe more budget-friendly options.
So if Canada adopts these other standards,
you could suddenly see a lot more variety, different types of cars, maybe different price points.
And this could potentially fill gaps too, right? If tariffs make some North American-focused models too expensive, like that Mazda CX-50 Pause people talked about.
Precisely. It gives the Canadian market more resilience. If one source gets difficult or pricey, maybe vehicles meeting European or Asian standards can fill the void. More choice, potentially stable or even lower costs in some segments.
So Reyes envisions a future where Canadian and U.S. showrooms might not look identical anymore.
Yeah, he actually said something like, not every showroom in Canada and the U.S. will look identical, as they have over the last 10 years. That's a pretty strong hint and divergence.
A future where the Canadian car market might carve out its own identity influenced by global standards, not just North American ones.
That seems to be the potential outcome they're exploring, more alignment with global players.
So something for you to think about, this whole idea of differing standards. What does it mean when safety or other regulations aren't perfectly aligned across borders?
Beyond just cars, think about other goods. How might those differences impact the choices available to you, the prices you pay, or even the types of innovation you see?
Definitely food for thought. It touches on trade, consumer choice, regulations, a lot to consider.